And call this meeting to order, August 15th, 2024, Planning Commission. Can we stand, have a roll call? Aaron.
Here. Here.
Here.
Here.
Here.
Thank you. If we may stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you. In a second.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Can we have a motion for the approval of the minutes of July 18th,
Yeah,
2024?
I'll motion to approve the minutes from July 18th, 2024.
Thank you. Thank you, Carl. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Now we come to the consent agenda. Case number 24-3013. Any discussion? If not, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Under new business, case number 24-5040. Zachariah Sneesby, applicant. Jessica Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jessica Gonzalez, Building and Development Senior with the Growth Management Division. Zacharias Sneesby, applicant, requests approval of a CUP to allow commercial greenhouse to grow cannabis indoors on a 40-acre site. A proposed 3,000 square foot greenhouse and an existing 760 square foot structure will be utilized for growing. A 400 square foot existing cellar will be utilized to dry and cure the product as a separate building. The site is zoned residential estate. Appendix B use matrix identifies a commercial greenhouse as a conditional use within the Res E zoning district. Section 10.22.3.3 of the Sustainable Land Development Code, ordinance number 2016-9, states a cannabis producer micro business that cultivates cannabis plants indoors shall be treated the same as the following use, commercial greenhouse. The site is located at 45 South Weimer Road, SDA 2, Commission District 3. The applicant requests approval of a CUP to allow a commercial greenhouse to grow cannabis indoors on a 40-acre site. A proposed 3,000 square foot greenhouse and an existing 760 square foot structure will be utilized for growing. A 400 square foot cellar will be utilized to dry and cure the product as a separate building. The applicant is required to comply with New Mexico Regulation and Licensing Department regulations pertaining to licensing and operating the facility. The applicant has obtained a New Mexico Cannabis Producer Microbusiness License, which allows a cannabis producer at a single licensed premises to possess no more than 200 total mature cannabis plants at any one time. The applicant has addressed the CUP criteria and staff has responded to the applicant's comments. The applicant addressed and staff reviewed the following applicable design standards: access, fire protection, fences and walls, lighting, signs, parking and loading, road design standards, water supply and water conservation, train management, solid waste, air quality, and noise. Building and Development Services staff has reviewed this project for compliance with pertinent SLDC requirements and has found that the facts presented support the request for a conditional use permit to allow a proposed 3,000 square foot greenhouse and an existing 760 square foot structure to be used as a commercial greenhouse for the purpose of producing cannabis. The use is compatible with the current development within the affected zoning district. The use will not impact adjacent land uses, and the application satisfies the submittal requirements set forth in the SLDC, inclusive of the conditional use criteria set forth in Chapter 4, Section 4.9.6.5. The review comments from county staff have established that this application is in compliance with state requirements, standards identified in SLDC, Section 10.22, and required design standards set forth in the SLDC. On July 11th, 2024, this request was presented to the Sustainable Land Development Hearing Officer. The hearing officer memorialized findings of fact and conclusions of law in a recommended order on this request. The hearing officer, based on the evidence presented, recommended approval of the CUP with staff's recommended conditions. Staff recommends approval of a conditional use permit to allow a proposed 3,000 square foot greenhouse and an existing 760 square foot structure to be utilized as a commercial greenhouse for the purpose of producing cannabis. If the Planning Commission finds the CUP criteria has been met and recommends approval of the CUP, staff recommends the following conditions be imposed. Mr. Chair, may I enter these conditions into the record?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. This report and the exhibits listed below are hereby submitted as part of the hearing record. Thank you. At this time, I stand for any questions.
Thank you. Do you have any questions of staff?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead, Mr. Mendoza.
Did you get a look at the social and economic equity plan for this particular project?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, I did not.
I'm sorry,
I did not.
You did not?
No.
I think it would have been useful to have it as part of the exhibits because it'll show who they're expecting to hire, what kind of economic equity they're going to give back to the community. And that's part of the application plan in most of these projects.
Mr. Chair, Commission Member Mendoza, that is not required as part of the application for CUP.
No, I understand that, but it's part of the application of the state, and I think it would be useful for us to see that because it is in our county.
Mr. Chair, Commission Member Mendoza, we will look into that and see if we can include it, incorporate it into the future submittals.
Any other questions of staff? I see none. Oh, Eric.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at a couple of the exhibits, and I just want to clarify, this is for a single 200 plant indoor grow. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, that is correct.
Yeah, when I look at the water budget, it appears to show both an indoor and outdoor, and I'm confused. I'm wondering if that's just for reference. If you look at Exhibit 3, it sums those two, and so I'm just wondering what the disconnect is. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, I can get the applicant to answer that question.
Thanks.
Any other questions of staff? If not, is the applicant here? Yes. Mr. Sneesby? Yes. Please step forward and get sworn in. Yes.
Yes, I do. My name is Zachariah Sneesby. My address is 25 Yerba Buenas, Rios, New Mexico, 87010. Thank you.
Thank you.
The problem with that was I keep in my mind the greenhouse space is an outdoor space and not the indoor space. I have a small room set up. Oh, sorry. I have a small room set up to do a small winter crop, which isn't more than 120 plants, so that I can further my season. But I only plan to do one season cropping in the greenhouse, so I'm not going to use I'm only using available lighting. I'm not using any extra lighting or anything like that. So I kept thinking, because it was more of an outdoor environment, that meant outdoor. And I was corrected to say that this was to be all indoor, and I just didn't fix that on that particular paper.
Great, thanks.
Yep. Any other questions?
Do we have any questions of Mr. Sneesby? Carl?
Excuse me, Mr.
Sneesby, yes.
Yes, so you weren't going to give any presentation, you're just looking straight to questions, is that correct?
Yeah, if you want to ask any questions, I'm
Okay,
open for
no, that's
questions.
fine, I mean,
Yeah.
most applicants will come with some proposal or something, but that's fine, we can go straight to questions. Mr. Chairman, and does let me get your name, make sure I say it right here.
Sneesby.
That's the play with the Sneezing Bee Farms.
Sneezeby.
That's
Okay,
how
Mr.
people
Sneezeby.
used to refer to me, so I'm trying to turn a negative into a positive in my
Yeah.
life. So,
So, Mr. Sneesby, the greenhouse currently isn't built,
there
is
is
that
no
correct?
greenhouse, no, it's to be built in the area, exactly.
Okay, and the two current structures, as I understand, there's 40 acres of land, but the two current structures, in the site plan, I don't see where they sit. It looks like they sit maybe towards the right corner, I can't tell which is north or south, but,
On the the southeast corner of the property, exactly, is where the two structures. I have a small hill, so it actually blocks anybody that is actually really around me's view from where my two structures are. So when you're out there, it feels like you're in the middle of nowhere, actually.
okay, and the greenhouse is the intent to place it close to these two structures?
Actually, there is an established pond with a large concrete box that I plan to use to hold my water in, and the greenhouse will be behind it, and then the pond will actually be set up to receive all of the catchment water that the greenhouse actually does provide, so that I can also put that into my fruit trees. So I'm also planning on a large catchment for the pond that is established there.
So if I heard you correctly, the pond it is established or it's not, but you're...
It is established.
And-
The
oh.
pond and the concrete structure were established. The man who grew about 20 years ago grew garlic for most of the Italian restaurants in Albuquerque, and I guess he had this way of floating the garlic after they finished out onto the pond to wash it, and then they have a big wash basin that's still there, and him and his wife used to wash and then weave the garlic into the garlands and sell it all over Albuquerque. So that's what I'm trying to also do, garlic there as well, to keep that in memory of him.
Okay. And I don't know completely the cannabis law that was passed. I know I watched one of the letters of opposition, and this is for staff here. It says that the use of domestic wells or water is not allowed on commercial grow purposes.
Exactly. I had to actually purchase commercial rights. I do have 2 wells on there, one that is a residential well, but luckily, when I was sold the property, my realtor told me it was agricultural and that the well was pre-1955 with commercial rights. So I got very excited, bought the property thinking this was a great opportunity for me, and I didn't find out until I went to transfer the well over that was totally wrong. Went to zoning, totally wrong. It was Res E. I had no water rights, so I actually started the process and had to buy 2 acre feet or 2 acres to have as commercial. I had to buy 2.56 acre feet of water to have that commercial right.
So, Mr. Sneesby, that 2.56 acre or whatever the amount was, that's been purchased and transferred to that particular hole to divert it for
Exactly,
that purpose.
and it's been totally converted already, yes.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I don't have any other questions at this point.
Wendy?
Were there water rights associated with this property before you bought it?
The residential ones were. We had to do a whole rediscovery on where the well, I had to retrack down the well, all of the stuff of where this original well that was underneath a windmill. That's why I thought it was, plus the windmill was very destroyed, so I, in my book, could have seen it as being an old windmill, but then I understand that it was actually drilled in 1977, and they didn't have the same, you know, engineer stuff back then. So the engineer and I, the state engineer, found all those records, got everything, figured it all out, got the testing, got all that done, and then transferred the water rights over. So I've been through quite a bit to get these water rights.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions? If not,
I have
Eric?
I have a comment, actually.
Okay.
Given the concern by the commissioners of the town of Edgewood, I would encourage you to consider including in your project leak detection devices.
Oh, yes.
In case you get a leak, you know, you can at least placate the commissioners a little bit by doing that.
Okay, yes, I do have a Bluetooth device that I did install that does have leak protection on it. So,
Yeah, I know,
yes.
because water's super precious.
Yeah,
in this state.
I'm born and raised in Madrid, so I know exactly how precious water is being
Okay.
from a non-good water source. And everything that I have done in my life has been towards conserving water because of this. So I do have a lot of water conservation type ideals for the way that I want to farm that are very high tech, and you know, China is doing them and stuff like that. I plan to have agricultural solar panels over everything and feed back into the system with solar, and I plan to have stuff like that and bees and everything to basically make it I'm trying to create this as my career so I can step away from another career. So I'm hoping to do this right in the best way I can so it prospers longer than me and to my, hopefully my family long after me.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Eric?
Thanks. Mr. Sneesby, do you live on this property?
No, I do not live in this property. I live in Cerrillos. That's where I'm born and raised in Madrid, but I moved to Cerrillos because of the water problems in Madrid, because I wanted good water and be part of I'm very part of their active water board and stuff. So I live in Cerrillos, and I have hired my neighbor as my security because he's a really nice guy, and we only have 2 people that live in front of me on this road. I'm at the end of this road, and it dead ends, and there's no one past me. So he's very aware because of his family and stuff of who goes up and down. And then I do have the security system. So if anything does go wrong, he can actually be there right away to help me. And I felt this was an easier way than using resource and having someone there.
Great. And so so your neighbor is doing security for you. Is there anyone living on this property?
No.
And did you say there are 2 wells on the property?
Yes.
The site plan, I can only see the pre-existing commercial well into which you transferred the 2.5 acre feet. Is the other well connected to anything?
No. It's only connected to the toilet in the house.
So
And
there is
the
a house,
sink.
but it's not currently occupied.
It's not currently occupied. That's the structure that I plan to turn into a office in the front with a small grow room in the back.
Got it. And so, just to be clear, that the plumbing will not be, the plumbing for this greenhouse operation will not be interconnected with the well that has residential rights? Is that
Not
correct?
at all. They are
Perfect.
totally on 2 separate. It even has its own, the windmill had its own little tank that fills down to the other main tank. That's why I chose this type of system.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Sneesby, one question I had was, since this is 40 acres, do you have any plans at this point for the remaining land as far as cultivation, or it's a large piece of land?
Yeah, no, the reason I first bought into a 40 acre was I felt, and agricultural, was I felt that was, when I originally went to the hearing, that was something that was kind of stated as being something they would like to see is put to a dairy standard, and that was a 40 acre lot. So I looked for a 40 acre lot, but I never ever had plans to actually use it, but I really felt that was a good buffer zone for air quality and stuff like that from other neighbors. And upon finding this particular piece, it really felt perfect for that type of perfect scenario for me, so that I wasn't being very obstructive to other neighbors, and I was on my own little, so hopefully I could be as, I'm a very recluse person in general, so I could be very private about it, so.
Thank you. So essentially, the vast majority of the land is native, naturalized vegetation, if any, on the site?
Exactly.
So it's basically a carbon sink.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. One follow-up question. In the neighborhood meeting report, I noticed it was held in Madrid, which sounds like a great place to have a neighborhood meeting, but, and that's quite a distance. Of course, we have a big county, and it's quite a distance from...
I did try to resource a closer place and had a lot of kickback about why I was doing it and stuff like that. So I was unable to source a place, and my next best was I was either going to go with the Cerrillos community, the Park Community Center there. That was the only other place that had actually said I could do it. And then Lori at the bar offered me the Engine House Theater and said I could do it there. So I felt it was a good place that people could find and get there if they wanted to.
Well, thanks for the explanation. I think it's interesting we used a theater for this. Maybe we want to look at more of that sort of thing. But that's all the questions I had. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. If anybody else has questions, if not, Jeremy? Oh, Carl, yes, go ahead.
I have a couple more questions. Mr. Sneesby?
Yes.
So the well that you got the commercial rights transferred to, did the state engineer require you to put a meter on that well?
Yes, I have a meter on it, and I haven't used it at all, but yes, I am putting in the proper I'm keeping it active with
Okay.
sorry. My mind's not thinking the word I'm trying to say.
And with the purchase of this water, we're a state of beneficial use, and so you might want to look into that just for your own well-being later on to see where you could possibly I won't go into it, but it's probably better to look into it. But one question I have is that I keep seeing the 200 plants, and I don't know is that a micro grow? Is that?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
It's a very small grow, and actually, because I am planning on just having a small staff, it probably won't ever even reach that. I'm hoping it could possibly get there, but I don't know if I have the manpower and resource right now to really actually accomplish that.
And so then the next step is after 200 plant, it goes to a macro. What?
It goes to 1,000, which is a commercial grow, and I have never planned. I even think 200 is a lot of plants, to tell you the truth. And I think for what I'm trying to do, I'm actually trying to create good medicine and not just a lot of biomass and not just a lot, because it has been a good medicine for me in my life, and I want to see that continue. So I believe in the medical benefits of this over the greed or money that may come with it, I hope that it does bring in some money so I can survive, but I'm not a person looking to get rich off of this. I'm just looking to hopefully subsidize some other crops that I hopefully can make money off of as well, and if one fails, I have a backup. That's more what this has all been about.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, and I get that, but there's always things change in life, and you may sell it. We never know, and so I guess the question for staff is, if we approve this conditional use permit now, and Mr. Sneesby or somebody else that buys the property decides they want to go into a macro grow or something up to 1,000 plants, does it have to come back for another conditional use permit?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Member Trujillo, that is correct. It would have to come back before us and before you all.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Other than that, I don't have any other questions.
Thank you very much. I've got a couple of questions. How many buildings are you going to utilize for your operation? You have a 3,000 square foot greenhouse, 760 structure for growing, and 400 square foot for drying in a cellar.
Exactly.
And how many plants can you grow at one time?
200 plants at one time.
What about
But actually, in the indoor space, it only has, at max, if I really tried to crush them together, I could possibly get 160, but I was only planning about 120 to give them the space that they need. in in the, what I would call my winter grow, so that I can keep a full season going. But on the outside, it's only ever going to be 200 plants, and I will not be running the indoor thing at the same time.
The other question I had is I read in the packet that you're gonna have two growings a year.
See, that's what I'm talking
How does
about.
that come out? You know, the
That's-
growing season here is kind of short. So how do you plan to have,
That's what I'm talking about. I'm planning on doing the greenhouse during the summertime and using all the available light during the summertime. But then the 720 foot structure, I have built a small indoor operation, like I said, that can only hold about 120 plants. And that one I can hopefully get another crop out during the winter time while it's cold.
okay, so you're gonna have two harvests per year? Is that what you
Exactly.
plan to do?
Or possibly 3 if I do it right, but that's about the most. Yeah.
And that will not exceed the 200 plants that you're allowed?
No, never would, because you also have the 200 that you're starting. So there's a time when I could actually have those starting and then have them ready to go into my winter. And then I can start my outdoor ones and then go out to my outdoor. That's the kind of flow plan.
Oh, it looks like you have that kind of figured out, because I can't grow too many things. in my
Yeah, I
greenhouse.
worked in, I have worked in the medical field of marijuana for about 3 years. So I do know the process of this out from the medical field. So I didn't really get along. And like I say, my recluse stuff came in. So I felt working for myself would be the only way to. And then I also had some real bad stuff. I worked in the movie industry and I was part of the Rust incident. And I felt this was a way to get out of that. So.
The other question I had is in a packet we showed on Exhibit 6, we showed that your application with the state engineer office was pending. Now, have you gotten that finalized yet?
Yes, I have. I've gotten it back up and everything.
What was the process you had to go through to do that? I know there's change of ownership is one, and then point of use is the other.
Exactly. The big part is that I had used an internet company to create my LLC, and I didn't know that I could change my, they started charging me more and more each month until I finally was like, you aren't really doing anything. And they were supposed to send me paperwork so I could change over the receivership. They never sent me that. Next thing I know, I was on a movie and I got the paperwork saying that it was up and that I had to change it over. I just, unfortunately, with the movie industry and my hours, I did not get the time to do that in that 30 days. And then I found out that it was definitely in, from when I came here, literally about 2 weeks later, they told me that it was, totally in, because I just had the letter saying that it was going to go. I didn't know how long I had to respond. And then when I realized that it was gone, when I was informed, I actually went and dealt with it very immediately.
Well, thank you very much.
Yep.
And next, this is the public hearing. Anybody from the public wishing to speak for or against this application?
Mr. Chairman,
Please step forward.
I wanted to ask him a quick question. I'm sorry I didn't pipe up soon
I'm
enough.
sorry, I didn't see your hand.
No, I did have my hand up. How many people are you planning to hire?
Right now, I only have the one person hired, and right now I can only actually, my wife and I have been doing most of the work because I really don't have a lot of money to hire anyone right now. But I do plan to hire at least 3 to 7 people in different, like as contractors, because you have the trimming I all want to do by hand, so I will hire a lot of independent contractors to do that part of it and stuff like that. As far as, employees every day, I do have plans to hire up towards 7, maybe possibly, but even when I was working for the medical field, I felt they overstaffed their stuff a lot of the time, so it was too many chefs in the kitchen type thing. So I'm also trying to keep it as controlled as how my system is as well, so I'm very much overseeing a lot of it.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. A member of the public, please step forward, state your name, and get sworn in.
Yes, sir. My name is Bill King, and I neighbor this place. Yes, I do. It's Bill King, 251 King Road, Stanley, New Mexico. I just have a question or a comment I'd like to do. And I'm not certain if you're the person who locked the gate to try to close the county road.
I was told by my realtor that I was allowed.
Because the access to my ranch goes to this county road, and it's maybe a dead end at that, but it's just because there's not a house there, I don't want them closing the county road down for security reasons or something. That's the concern I have. The other question I had is, I had some other people who were gonna ask the county to grow marijuana, but they wouldn't allow it to grow it outdoors. They said it wasn't zoned for that on the southern end of the county. It had to be in a greenhouse. Is that right or wrong? It's just a question.
I think Mr. Lovato can answer that. John? Or Mr. Yutzi?
Mr. Chair?
Yes,
They are allowed outdoors.
they can?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It is at a dead-end road, so I'm the only person who saw the sign. I had the invitation to matter.
I didn't hear that. Any other members of the public? Anybody online? Jordan?
Chairman, there's nobody online wishing to speak.
Okay, if no one else from the public wishes to speak, I'll close the public hearing. And what are the wishes of the commission?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move an approval of case 24-50-40 with the conditions 1 through 4 that are stated on the county land use report, planned land use report.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Wendy, you second it. We have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? Eric?
I believe there are 7 conditions, or
7?
maybe I'm not missing it. I'm sorry.
I see 4, but maybe it's, oh, is there? Well, I'll amend it to 7.
Okay, we have an amendment for 7 conditions. Everybody agree with that? Okay. Jeremy, any comments? Discussion?
Not at this time, no.
So we have a motion and a second. What are the wishes of the commission? Signify by saying aye if you approve.
Aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Sneesby.
There are 4.
There are 4. Okay, 4. Can we change that? We have 4 conditions. The next case is case number 24-5100 Goodman Management LLC, conditional use permit. Maggie Valdez?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Planning Commission. My name is Maggie Valdez. I'm a Review Development Specialist Senior. Today I come before you with case number 24-5100, 18 Erica Road Storage Facility, conditional use permit and variance. Goodman Management LLC, owner, Lloyd and Associates Architects Agent, request approval of a CUP to allow the expansion of an existing mini storage facility. The applicant proposes to construct 4 new buildings. Buildings F, 2,600 square foot, 13 storage units. Building H, 2,900 square foot, 10 storage units. Building I, 4,500 square foot, 30 storage units, and Building J, 7,100 square foot. 32 storage units. The variance request is to allow to build per prevailing setbacks. The overlay zoning requires a 25-foot setback from the front of the property and a 50-foot setback from the sides and the back property line. The point of these setbacks is in the overlay is to give buffer to the residential homes that border commercial developments. However, no residential uses are in this area of the property. The 3.443 acre site is within La Cienega Community District Overlay and zoned as commercial neighborhood use. Table 9-815 illustrates that a mini warehouse, mini storage unit are conditional use within the commercial neighborhood zoning subdistrict. The site is located at 18 Erica Road. Summary. The applicant requests approval of a conditional use permit is to add 4 storage buildings to the existing storage facility. The variance request is to allow to build prevailing setbacks. The overlay zoning requires a 25-foot setback from the front of the property and a 50-foot setback from the sides and back property line. The point of these setbacks are in the overlay to give buffer to the residential homes that border the commercial developments. However, no residential uses are in the area of the property. Additionally, all the existing buildings violate this setback. The owner proposes that the existing setbacks on the site of 20 feet be allowed as this is in keeping this underlying zoning. The applicant proposes to construct 4 new buildings, Building F, 2,600 square foot, 13 storage units, Building H, 2,900 square foot, 10 storage units, Building I, 4,500 square foot, 30 units, and Building J, 7,100 square foot, 32 storage units. The 3.443 acre site is within La Cienega and La Cienega Community District Overlay and zoned as commercial neighborhood. In response to the CUP criteria and variance criteria, the applicant states the following. The applicant has addressed the CUP criteria and the variance criteria. Staff has responded to the applicant's comments. Applicable design standards. The applicant has addressed the applicable design standards as regulated by the SLDCs. Building and Development Services staff has reviewed the project for compliance with the pertinent SLDC requirements and has found that the facts presented support the request for the conditional use permit CUP to allow the expansion of an existing mini storage facility, constructing 4 new buildings that consist of 2,600 square foot with 13 storage units, 2,900 square foot with 10 storage units, and 4,500 square foot with 30 storage units, 7,100 square foot with 32 storage units, sorry about that, on 3.443 acre site. The use is compatible with the current development within the affected zoning district. The use will not impact adjacent land uses, and the application satisfies the submittal requirements set forth in the SLDCs, inclusive of the conditional use criteria set forth in Chapter 4, Section 4.9.65. The review comments from the State Historic Preservation Office and county staff have established findings that this application to allow 4 new storage units is in compliance with the state requirements. Standards identified in the SLDC Section 9-12-3 and required design standards set forth in Chapter 7 SLDC. Hearing officer recommendations. On July 11th, 2024, this request was presented to the Sustainable Land Development Hearing Officer. The hearing officer memorialized findings of fact and conclusion of law and recommended order on this request. The hearing officer, based on the evidence presented, recommends that the application be granted, subject to the conditions required by staff. Staff recommends approval of the conditional use permit to allow for the expansion of an existing mini storage facility, constructing 4 new buildings that consist of 2,000 square feet with 13 storage units, 2,900 square feet, 10 storage units, and 10 storage units and 4,500 square feet with 30 storage units, 7,100 square foot with 32 storage units on 3.43 acres. Mr. Chair and Commission, may I enter the conditions into the record?
Yes, you may.
This report and the exhibits listed below are hereby submitted as part of the hearing record. Mr. Chair and Commission, I stand for questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions of Maggie?
Question.
Wendy?
So all the surrounding zoning is all commercial?
Yes, it's all commercial, that area, yes, ma'am.
All right, thanks.
Carl?
Mr. Chairman, Maggie, how are you doing?
Good, how are you, Carl?
Good, good. So the 25-foot setback and the 50-foot setback from the sides, the current structures that are there, they were put in before the Sustainable Land Development Code went into effect?
So there are some structures on the property that are encroaching on setbacks, am I correct? And then they also want to bring in some new storage units that will not meet setbacks. They'll be on the setbacks.
Okay, so there's currently buildings on the location, there's storage sheds there now.
Right, they're on that same location. They're going to be in that same area where
Okay.
all the existing ones are already.
And all the existing ones, do they even meet this 25 or 50-foot setback?
Chair, Commissioner,
Yes, Jordan?
right now they are actually considered legal non-conforming. They were there before the SLDC went into effect and the overlays were changed and the setbacks were changed. They were legal at the time that they were built. Now with the change in zoning, change in setbacks, they're considered legal non-conforming.
Okay, I was going to get to that point. Okay, thank you for that. I don't have any other questions this time.
Mr. Pava?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Valdez, when you entered the conditions, for the record, did that include the 2 additional conditions that the zoning hearing officer was asked to include? So there's really like 8 conditions?
Yes, there are
Thank you.
conditions. Yes, that would be the variance.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, sir.
If not, I have a couple of questions. You know, we've had the issue with setbacks come up before in different parts of the county. Why is it that La Cieneguilla has a 50-foot setback on the sides and back of the property? I mean, is that ever going to change to be consistent with what the other parts of the county allow?
Mr. Chair, our planning department is currently working to reduce those setbacks in certain areas within that zoning district. So yes, that will be coming before you. I couldn't give you a date, but it should be coming soon.
So right now, the setbacks are 50 feet. And these buildings don't conform with the setbacks. They encroach into the setback by how many feet?
It's by 20, if I'm not correct. Is it 25? 20 feet, 25 feet. 25 feet right here is the overlay. So they're encroaching 25 feet. That's what the variance is for.
And the older buildings that were built there, are they within the allowable setback when they were built in 2001 or 2002?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
that's correct, and they are legal non-conforming structures.
And when was this changed, the 50-foot setbacks? When did that occur?
Mr. Chair, that changed in 2016 when they wrote the ordinance and included the overlay districts.
How did that change? I wasn't aware that it changed in our area, in La Cienega.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, the way it was done through public hearing and proper notice to proper, within the area, through the zoning district. And mailouts were sent, formal hearings were set, meetings were set, and then it was adopted.
And now the proposed new changes in that area are going back to 25 feet? Is that what the county is recommending?
Mr. Chair, I do not have the answer to that question, but I can look into it for you.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just a little bit of history here, because These
Tell us.
overlay districts, I was very involved with them because at the time when I was representing the community down in the valley, the county did reach out to all the different, Chimayo and Poaca, Nambe, La Cienega, and it was Mr. Griego, I think was his name, the gentleman. And so he would send out as many emails as possible and try and engage the public to get there. But ultimately, you go to the meeting, and some meetings, it'd only be 1 or 2 people. And so now he's asking for input from a whole community. And, maybe they came to this area and 1 or 2 people showed up and they say, we think this is what we want in our community. And so the county did try and reach out, but, as people are busy with their lives and stuff, it's always hard to get a lot of community involvement. Down in the valley, we actually had quite a few people, and we actually set some pretty reasonable setbacks that got adopted in the Sustainable Land Development Code.
Well, thank you for the lesson there, Mr. Trujillo. If not, if we don't have any more questions of staff, then as the applicant here, please step forward.
Where'd she go?
State your name and be sworn in.
She's gone.
I will tell the truth.
We have to wait a minute.
Wayne Lloyd, 740 St. Michael's Drive.
When she comes back, you'll be sworn in. Meantime, we have to just be patient.
Where'd she go? Finished. Oh, there she is. No.
Not yet.
I do. Wayne Lloyd, 740 St. Michael's Drive. I think Maggie did a great job, so I don't have anything to add. I'll stand for questions.
You have to say something to us. State your case.
State our case. These buildings, the existing buildings were built 10 or 15 years ago. That whole property was sold to the present owner. They were built initially conforming to all the setbacks. The zoning changed in the time frame of when they were built till now. So the buildings that we're proposing to keep the same setback as the existing buildings, you don't even see from the road. I don't know if we can bring up a site plan or not.
We have it.
You have it?
Yeah.
So you can see that the one that we're filling in is in between 2 buildings that are already at a 25-foot setback. So we're just taking it out to the same point. It seems irrational to set that one back 50 feet when the 2 right beside it are at 25 feet. So the staff agreed with us, and I don't think I can elaborate any further than that.
Well, thank you very much. I think we might have some questions. Eric?
Thanks very much. Mr. Lloyd, I'm looking at the aerial photo, and I'm looking at the site plan, and after I rotate them to be the same, I can't count and make things match with the request. If you look at the decreasing, the shrinking row that parallel Erica Street, I count 4 existing buildings. And in the site plan, there are 7 buildings that are drawn. And the ones that go square to Erica, I show one that exists and a really narrow one, and that becomes 4. So I see an additional 8 structures, I think, but there's only a request for 4. So I'm trying to reconcile what I see from the sky, what exists right now, and what I see in the site plan. And so I'm not sure if that was clear enough, but I wonder if you can help me understand.
Well, it was clear. But I do have the site plan showing the 4 buildings that we're adding, and I presume you have that. Now, I don't think I have an aerial view in here, so I'm not sure.
Could you speak in the mic, please? I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, the aerial view.
Could you speak in the mic, please? Could you speak in the mic? Thanks.
The aerial view simply isn't current.
Okay, so what is shown in the aerial view is not what's on the ground right now. It's, and that makes, so it's understandable. So okay. The other question I have is regarding the coverage, right? That's what I've got, but I'm looking at the aerial, and the aerial is incorrect. So if we went to Google Earth right now, we would see something closer to your site plan. Great. The other question I have is, I think there were a number of questions from the hearing officer about lot coverage. I think the requirement is that at least 50% of the lot not be covered.
Yeah.
And there were a number of questions on that. Does that lot coverage, is that just about the buildings or also asphalt?
As far as I know, that's the building.
And staff, is that correct? Does the asphalt count against the coverage?
Mr. Chair, Commission Member Abo, it does not count against the coverage.
Right answer. Thanks. That's the only question I have. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Do we have any other questions, Carl?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Lloyd. Yeah, so now after you clarified the aerial view and then the site plan, it looks like those buildings that aren't shown on the aerial view say here, existing non-permit after the fact permit. So has a permit been obtained, or is that going to be in the process of obtaining these new permits?
Not sure I follow the question.
So I'm looking on the site plan right now, and every other building, building B, it says existing non-permitted after the fact permit.
Yes.
Existing D.
What happened was the original builder built a certain number of those buildings that show up in the aerial. They also poured slabs because they didn't have enough money to build them all. So somewhere before the time that this owner bought this property, they built those buildings on the slabs, but they didn't permit them.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Trujillo, if I can also clarify, 2 of those structures are non-permitted, and so they will have to obtain permits, after the fact permits for those structures as well.
Okay, and Mr. Chair, is that in the conditions if approved? Is that listed in there?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Trujillo, I did not see that as a condition. That may be something the board may impose.
Any other questions? If not, I've got a couple of questions. I saw in the packet that there were 6 existing buildings. Is that what you saw that?
There is what?
There were 6 existing buildings on that property before you made this application.
There were 7.
7?
Yes.
Okay, in the packet was 6, but I guess the maps aerial shows 7. And you're adding 4 buildings. And 2
Yes.
of those have to be after the fact permits.
Yes.
And the existing buildings, were they within the 50-foot setback or the 25-foot setback? What's the closest you are to the property lines, front, back, and sides?
25 feet.
That's,
And that both the existing and the new are conforming to that.
are within 25 feet. So, okay, well, that is good news because, you know, the county has a 25-foot setback countywide. In some areas, La Cienega, it's been a 50-foot setback. So at some point, you get a variance with the new revised La Cienega plan, you'll probably be in compliance. So.
Yes.
Do we have any more questions of staff? I mean, of the applicant? If not, this is a public hearing. Anybody from the public wishing to speak for or against this case, please step forward. Anybody online, Jordan?
Chairman, there's nobody online
Nobody
indicating they
online,
wish to speak.
so I guess we will close the public hearing. And what are the wishes of the commission?
I'd move to approve the variance request, including all of the conditions, plus an additional condition that the applicant must obtain after-the-fact permits for all structures not currently properly permitted.
Thank you, Eric. Have a second. Wendy, you seconded. We have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Would the maker of the motion consider that we add an additional condition to the effect, any existing buildings that haven't been permitted must be submitted for permit approval prior to a CO being issued for the new buildings?
Is that a friendly amendment?
Yes, I'll accept that, although a CO is not the responsibility of the county, but I'll accept that.
Well, if you want to reword it somewhat, that's fine. I think you got the intent.
Mr. Chair, Commission Member Abo, if I may intrude, an after-the-fact permit will require a certificate of completion from Santa Fe County, so we do inspect that portion. So that could be an amendment to your.
Yeah, if we change the word to completion in your request, yeah, that's a friendly amendment to me. Thank you.
I concur with that. Thank you.
Any discussion on any of the motions?
So just so I'm clear, so we don't put this gentleman in a bind, the county, because the state won't offer a certificate of occupancy for something that's permitted later on. So you're saying that the county will go in and just give the approval that it could be occupied or used?
Mr. Chair, Commission Member Trujillo, that's correct.
Okay. And so that's ultimately what the amendment is that's offered. Okay. I just want to make sure we don't put you in a bind. Okay.
Yes, now we have a motion and a second with a friendly amendment and conditions. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we go on to case number 245060. Beverly Todd applicant request a variance. Dominic?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commission members. Dominic Cisneros, Building and Development Supervisor with Growth Management Division. Beverly Todd applicant requests approval of a density variance to allow 2 dwelling units on a 4.997 acre parcel of Chapter 8, Table 8-9, Dimensional Standards, Residential Fringe. The applicant has an existing main residence of 2,300 square feet and a guest home of 2,300 square feet. The subject property lies within the Residential Fringe zoning district, where the base density is 1 dwelling per 5 acres. The property is located at 83 Apache Ridge Road, SDA 2, within Township 15 North, Range 10 East, Section 3, Commission District 4. This application was submitted on April 12, 2024. The applicant presented a submittal application for a short-term rental registration and a business license for an art studio to staff. The site plan and aerial photo illustrated a primary residence, a second dwelling with a loft that included a bathroom and kitchen, a structure/studio, and an accessory structure that is utilized as a garage. Staff conducted a search on the county, Staff conducted a search on the county database to verify that all structures being utilized for the short-term rental on the property had been permitted with Santa Fe County. Staff determined that the primary residence, the structure/studios, and the garage had been permitted with Santa Fe County. The ADU with the loft area at some point in time with the structure and studio was converted into a dwelling with a loft. The applicant has stated that the property was purchased as is and recorded with the Santa Fe County Clerk Department on September 20th, 2019. The applicant is requesting a variance of Table 8-9 dimensional standards for residential fringe zoning to allow 2 dwellings on a 4.997 acre lot. Residential fringe zoning allows for 1 dwelling per 5 acres. The primary residence consists of 2,300 square feet heated area, and the second dwelling consists of 2,300 square foot, which includes a loft. The applicant states that she bought the property as is with the second dwelling, having a loft and exceeding the square footage that would allow it to qualify as an accessory dwelling unit, and is on individual septic system, which is contrary to the SLDC standards for an accessory dwelling unit as defined by the SLDC. Section 10.4.2.3. The applicant has addressed the variance criteria and staff has responded to the applicant's comments. On June 13, 2024, the request was presented to the Sustainable Land Development Hearing Officer. The hearing officer memorialized findings of fact and conditions of law in a recommended order on this request. The recommendation of staff and the recommendation of the hearing officer based on the evidence presented is for denial of the request to allow a variance of density to allow 2 dwelling units on a 4.9.7 acre parcel. If the Planning Commission finds that the application has met the variance criteria and recommends approval of the variance, staff recommends the following conditions be imposed. May I enter these conditions into the...
Yes, you may.
This report and exhibits listed below are hereby submitted as part of the hearing record. Thank you. At this time, I stand for any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions of Mr. Cisneros? Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Cisneros, could you provide me a little bit more context on the nature of the so-called density variance? In my past experience, this is a little new for me. I would consider something like a zone change, but we're actually allowed in Santa Fe County, obviously, to grant something called the density variance. So could you elaborate a little bit more on how that works?
Yeah, so the existing zoning allows for 1 dwelling per 5 acres. A request for a density variance is asking for an easing of the code to allow more than 1 allowed residence for the acreage that is allowed on the property. So therefore, rather than the 1 dwelling per 5 acres, since they're just under the 5 acres, instead of the 1 dwelling, they're asking for 2 full primary dwellings.
I think I get that part. I just don't hold that while I'm talking. It's weird. Yes, so in Santa Fe County, it is permitted, it is part of the code. The density variances are described as a procedure in the code.
A variance request is the procedure. The variance of the density is particular to that zoning district.
Okay, thank you. My next question, regarding that both of these equal size units are on one septic system, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Would the existence or installation of a separate septic system as required by code, being a condition of approval, mitigate any granting of this variance? I know staff has recommended against granting the density variance. And part of the density variance would then be connected to things like septic systems, because this is a residential fringe area, and those are the kinds of concerns we have in these areas according to the Land Development Code. Would you care to offer an opinion or address this? I notice it's not discussed anywhere. The idea of some kind of reconfiguration of the loft part of the second unit away from and separate from it with an entrance from the artist studio was discussed, but I didn't see any mention of the septic system. if this were to be approved, would they be required to put in a separate septic, or is that not something staff is concerned with?
So they wouldn't be required, so if this structure would have been considered an accessory dwelling unit, they would have been required to share the driveway as well as the utilities. If this property is granted a density variance, they would be allowed to put a second septic system if they were approved.
But they would not be required to install it.
No, that is correct. They would not be required.
Thank you for the clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Baba. Mr. Mendoza.
Yeah, Dominique, I was curious, did you maybe happen to look into the well at all? Do you know what the state engineer's allocation is for that particular well, and is the well metered?
They do have a well permit as part of some of the exhibits. Let me see here. A well permit was granted. It may not have been submitted as part of the exhibits. I can ask the applicant, and we can ask the applicant if that well is metered. I'm not aware if that current well is metered or not.
Mr. Chair, Commission Member Mendoza, at the time of development, of any development as such, they will be required to 0.25 acre feet per dwelling. In this particular case, it would be that 0.25 acre feet for each residence.
Thank you, Mr. Lovato. Carl?
Mr. Cisneros, just walk me through the site plan real quick. I see a residence there, and then I see a studio. I see three things listed as studios. And so these are existing buildings, I take it. And so the residence is considered the residence, and then the other structure that's equivalent in size, right? Is that supposed to be, I think I read they were both 2,600 square feet? Or 2,300 square feet? Which is the second building on that site plan that's the 2,300 square feet?
So it is the northeast structure.
Okay. And then the structure just to the left of that, is this another studio?
That is just another studio labeled as a studio, but that is in fact just an accessory structure.
Oh, okay. And then there's one as you drive in, is that correct?
That is correct. That's the accessory structure that is a garage.
Well, that's a garage, but listed as a studio here. Okay. And so the question is all the ones that do have bathrooms or use of water are the two structures, but not the studio on top to the left?
So the two structures that are considered the residence is the central structure, that is the main residence, and then the structure that is northeast that was permitted originally as an accessory structure / studio, but was converted into a dwelling with a kitchen and a full bathroom.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Cisneros.
Do we have any other questions, Wendy?
Well, just on the studio on the left of that one, does that have any water? Is there a bathroom in that? Just no kitchen?
I'm not one of the original staff members that did that inspection. I don't believe that there's water in that structure. If there is, it may just be a half bathroom. I would have to confer with the applicant on that.
Eric?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to get clear on the septic system, sorry. My understanding is that if there were to be a reconfiguration to turn the existing plumbed studio into something that could be approved as an accessory structure, then those two would be required to be on the same septic system, right? Because I remember we had one a couple times ago where that was a problem. So I think that if there were, as the hearing officer suggested, some opportunity to split the space up into a smaller ADU with studio adjacent, the septic works out just fine. Is that close?
That is correct. So an accessory dwelling unit must share the driveway and utilities with the primary residence. So if that were converted into an accessory dwelling unit, it would be required to share, which it meets the standards of right now.
Thank you very much. I have another question that is kind of staff. I understand that the intention is to use this as a short-term rental. If this variance were denied by this body and appealed to the BCC and denied, does the property owner, are they able to put one of these places out for rent that doesn't go through the STR process? What is the way to address the existing condition on the ground? Does that make sense?
So as it exists right now, it's the unpermitted conversion of the structure into a dwelling. It doesn't meet SLDC standards. So it would either have to be converted, as such the hearing officer had recommended, partially, where it could be considered an accessory dwelling unit, and then that could be subject to a short-term rental or a long-term rental. But as it stands now, we wouldn't be able to issue any type of license because it does not meet the standards as it is a full dwelling.
But you would not have to issue any kind of license if they chose to bring their cousins in from Indiana or if they chose to put it out for rent. You would not have to, the county would take no action unless there was a bunch of guys going out demanding it be torn down or something. I'm trying to understand, if they exit this unsuccessfully, what is the next route to be able to utilize this structure, or is reconfiguration or demolition the only approach for them?
So it would have to be reconfiguration or demolition, the removal of the bathroom and or full bathroom and kitchen.
And how would that happen? I'm just trying to think of the county processes. Is that a situation for the code enforcement inspectors would come out and issue a notice of violation? You, because you came in and got caught with the STR process, now have to do this, or you would be subject to whatever the $300 a violation, whatever the terms and conditions are, and go to district court. That's pretty much the process?
Yes, this property would be subject to a notice of violation from code enforcement.
Great. As you can see, I'm not really too happy with this process. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, Commission Member Bo, and just to take note, accessory structures such as studios as such are non-habitable structures, so no one would be able to reside in one or stay in one.
And so that's an enforcement action, not a development permit act. It's an enforcement action. Thanks.
Thank you, Eric. Do we have any other questions? Carl?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Cisneros, so just so I'm clear, the variance that's being requested is a density variance. And so with the density variance, will allow the two, if granted, allow the two units that are equivalent size, basically. And then, so then the third structure that may or may not have a bathroom in there would be considered an accessory dwelling to the variance? Is that how that would work?
No, that existing structure would still remain an accessory structure. An accessory dwelling unit is either a full bathroom and kitchen or kitchen. An accessory structure can have one toilet and one sink, but it's not considered a dwelling.
Got it. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I think I have some, Mr. Pava.
I didn't want to ask three questions in a row, but then I actually remembered I had another question, and Mr. Cisneros and staff were kind enough to prepare a map that shows the surrounding area. I had requested this at the late yesterday evening, so I appreciate this. The reason that I had requested the map was to ask staff regarding in the proximity, are there other approved short-term rentals? And are there the other ADUs, accessory dwelling units that have been built or approved. And this is just to provide context a little bit more to this request, because there has been some mention in letters regarding the proposal that maybe there are too many in this area, and that the county should be careful in reviewing these requests. So the question is are there, to your knowledge, other STRs and ADUs in proximity, maybe as shown on the map that you handed out, this exhibit, within a quarter mile or so, within the neighborhood?
So there was recently a case that was brought forward that is similar to this request, the Francis Phillips case, that was denied by the Planning Commission and then appealed to the BCC and approved at the BCC. That's the only one that I know of this nature that is in that area.
And Chair, Commissioners, to let you know that there are probably some more in the area, and when the ordinance was passed for STRs, we have a limit on a number. I believe it's, depending on where you are, it's 3 to 5% of the total number of homes in a census district for non-owner occupied. There really is no, in the ordinance, there's none for owner occupied, and this one would be considered an owner occupied STR. So the county has not enforced any limits on owner occupied. The only limits are on non-owner occupied.
Let me repeat what you just said, Mr. Yossi, that this would be considered a situation where the STR would be owner occupied?
Yes,
Yeah,
that is correct.
I think that's an important clarification in this particular case, and every case has to be considered on its own merits, not necessarily because there are others in the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pava. Carl?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Cisneros, so if this is approved, I look at the conditions here. It says applicant shall provide OSC and NMED permits at the time or after the fact permit submittal. So when this person that owns this property goes to the environmental department, they're going to look to rectify this, and there's going to be a couple possible solutions. One of it would be, depending on if the tank size is large enough, then maybe they have them add more leach field, maybe they have them replace the tank, or maybe they have them add another septic system. But my point being is that whatever the NMED recommends as a path forward, is the county going to accept that based on this condition here?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. No matter whether it says that an accessory dwelling has because we're changing the density, then okay. Thank you.
Are you done? Okay. I've got a couple of questions, Dominic. How many of these structures on this property were permitted? And what were the permits for?
So there is an existing permit for the residence. There are permits for the all structures. The only permit that was not pulled was the conversion of the accessory structure into a dwelling, which is the property that is located northeast.
Okay, so there was a studio that was permitted, small, I guess it was 900 square feet. Then there was a garage. Was that close to the studio, or were they both together?
No, it was separate.
Okay, and those had permits.
That is correct.
And then which was the one that was converted to a dwelling?
So the structure that is northeast, the one just above the residence up to the right, that one was converted into a residence at some point.
And that was not with a permit?
That is correct, unpermitted.
So how does that work out to try and get an after-the-fact permit if this is approved?
So they would have to provide, a site plan. They would have to come in just for an after-the-fact permit for basically an interior remodel.
But that does not comply with the density of the property.
That is correct.
So we're kind of down to having one residence, and they can have a studio and a garage. Is that it? And what other buildings are on that property? I saw there was another shed.
So if this was a vacant piece of property, this property right now by code would be allowed one single-family residence, one accessory dwelling unit, and accessory structures, as many accessory structures as they desired. With the way this currently stands, with the existing structures, that's why they need the variance, because the converted dwelling does not meet ADU requirements. Therefore, it couldn't be considered as an accessory dwelling unit. That's why they're asking for the density variance.
And that accessory dwelling exceeds whatever additional dwelling unit in square footage, is that correct?
It doesn't meet any accessory dwelling unit
doesn't?
standards, as it's considered two-story because it has a loft, and it's over on square footage.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of staff?
Yeah, I just want a clarification.
Wendy?
So on that dwelling, the studio was permitted. What wasn't permitted was the conversion.
That is correct.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, I have one other question, sorry about this, but so an accessory dwelling is obviously where somebody can live reside with a bathroom and kitchen, but an accessory structure, in the county code, you can have unlimited, or is there a limit of how many of those structures you can have? I mean, somebody could construct another 2 garages here if they chose to?
That is correct. As long as they're meeting setbacks, they're outside of any type of easements or flood zone or anything like that, that is correct.
Thank you.
Eric?
We're just hitting you with questions. Can an accessory structure be 2 stories?
An accessory structure can be 2 stories as long as it meets height.
And so does anyone know the logic that an accessory structure, or as many accessory structures that are desired, can be 2 stories, but an ADU has that limitation? Is that something that's being considered? This stuff is tripping us up, and I think since we opened that,
I think the idea
Airbnb
behind an
can-
accessory dwelling unit is that it looks subordinate to the primary residence. As for why the accessory structures don't fall under the same category as far as looking subordinate to the primary residence, that I don't know.
yeah, because barns, yeah.
Chair, Commissioners, every time y'all make these comments about what these things, I actually write them down, and they are being looked at as part of the rewrite of the SLDC.
I really appreciate that, because that's kind of why I'm talking. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. If there are no other questions of staff, is the applicant here? Please step forward.
Yes, the applicant is here.
I do. Beverly Todd, 83 Apache Ridge Road, Santa Fe. You ready?
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Good afternoon to the Planning Commission. Thank you for letting me present to you pertaining to the request for a variance to the density of the art studio on my property. The art studio is used for overnight artists in residency program, and I applied for the short-term rental application last year at the time that the ordinance was passed. And at that same time, then I also applied for the business license, and both of those were applied for on May 23rd, 2023. At that time, when we put that package together, is when the county discovered that that building was not permitted, as you just discussed. And it was, original permit was issued in 1998 by the owner Elias Rivera, and from my understanding from a neighbor, it was converted around 2003, they believe. So Rivera's owned the property. It went into foreclosure, went back to Northern Trust Company, the foreclosing bank, and that is who I purchased the property from. So a couple details on the variance of section 10.4. It says the accessory dwellings or a portion of the structure used for accessory dwellings cannot exceed 50% of the heated floor space of the principal residence up to 1,400 square foot. And the art studio in its entirety is about 2,300, equal to the size of the home. But the portion of the art studio used for dwelling for the residency is 900 square feet. And the remaining 1,400 is the open art studio. The second point in that section is that accessory dwellings can only be a single story. The art studio does include a sleeping loft that is open to the studio below. It has 7-foot ceilings. And rather than a full second story, the loft shares the same roof line, the same interior space as the full building. So there's no really bump up as a full second story. A little bit of the background: I purchased the property in September of 2019 as a home and art studio for myself. Plus, my intent was to have a second space that would be for other artists to come in residence that would generate passive income. This property in the real estate listings was listed as a main house with 2 professional studios, with one of those studios operating as a guest house. And at that time and now, that art studio is exact same configuration, the 2,300 square foot and the 900 square foot of living space. The previous owners used it similar to what I do. They held workshops and art shows. They rented out the space, hosted guests, and then it was Mr. Rivera's primary art studio. At the time of the purchase in 2019, the short-term rental licensing was not in effect. Therefore, I was not made aware of that the property was not properly permitted and could not be used as a short-term rental. So my intended use for this property is, number one, for my own art practice. My main occupation is as a professional artist. I'm a painter. I paint in the studio. I hold art shows in it, open houses, invite collectors in. And then the secondary use of that studio is the Artist in Residence program. And that means artists come in and they stay and live in the studio. They live there. They get up in their pajamas and paint in the morning, drink coffee, paint all day. And they choose this place, the studio, because it is that quiet solitude. It's a place they can go deep in their work. Often they're there preparing for an art show. And this, because the space is so big, it allows them to paint extremely big. And the type of artists that I attract for this come for that space, and they will paint on large canvases that can measure anywhere up to 7 foot wide by 10 feet long. Also, I teach and coach the artists when they're in residency, when they're here working in a one-on-one. So that's another source of income for me, is the coaching, teaching of the artists while they stay there. I don't offer short-term rentals in the traditional sense of Airbnb, and I don't intend to do that. The program provides a residency opportunity for just 1 to 2 artists at a time, and they typically stay 1 week to 1 month. I've been hosting artists in residence in there for the past 3 years, and by design, the number is small because I'm one of those introverted people that like my quietness, and when there's other people on the property, it's really hard for me to be creative. So definitely, I've designed it to have so few people there, but just enough to get the income. And I do have my numbers of artists in residence by year. In 2022, I had 5 artists staying in residence for a total of 30 nights short-term, and I had 1 artist that stayed 30 nights long-term. 2023, I had 3 artists staying for a total of 42 nights short-term, and there was no long-term. And then in 2024, I had 5 artists for a total of 35 nights short-term, and 1 artist for 31 nights, which was long-term. So at the age of 66, my goal when I moved here was to be able to create and go deep into my art and to be very self-sufficient. So really, I intend this to keep it as a small business that I can maintain and operate on my own, setting up, cleaning, doing everything. So it's a truly live-work space for myself, and it's also the opportunity for me to grow in my own art practice. And I thought there's a lot of questions about what the building looked like, so I thought I have a short video. If we could show that, it's a walkthrough of the property so you can get an idea of what it looks like. Can everyone see that? You're at the front door. Maybe we can restart it, because at the very, very beginning, you see the front face of the building. you get a visual of what the building looks like on the outside and the inside. And I wanted to thank the hearing officer, Marilyn, who suggested placing a wall in the studio to separate that living area from the larger studio space. I followed up with Bill Roth, who's the owner of Modern Design and Construction, and Bill has worked on this building, so he knows the structure intimately. And we considered a couple options. The first one was putting a wall up directly underneath the loft, but that reduces the total living space to 450 square feet, which doesn't leave room for any bed or sleeping area. As you can see, the exterior door comes through the middle, and that loft area underneath it is not very wide. It also would have support beams that would take up space, so the 450 square foot is not big enough for a residence. Then our second option we looked at was building out the wall further into the studio space to allow for a sleeping area on the first floor, which it takes away a great amount of space from the studio, leaving it inadequate area for the work of artists. So the contractor estimated the cost of both of these options around $50,000, and that large price tag is due to the removal and disposal of the loft, building an 18-foot wall. That's a really high space. There'd be a lot of rewiring of the electrical and installation of lights. We'd have to relocate the 70-foot art door. There'd be additional interior doors, repainting of walls, repatching the flooring, and the construction would take 3 to 4 months. So the wall price tag alone is cost prohibitive, and the income generated from the artist residency program is about $7,000 per year. That would mean it would take me more than 7 to 8 years to pay off the $50,000 loan plus interest, even if I could get the loan. And in those 7 to 8 years, I wouldn't have any income coming in, and that money goes to the mortgage, insurance, utilities, and other expenses. And that's a financial hardship that I would not be able to undertake. So talking a little bit about the public interest of this request, the variance is not contrary to public interest. Number one, the property is very well maintained. In 2019, when I built it, a new septic was put in, and we worked with the Department of Environmental Control, so it's permitted and adequate for the size of the two buildings. It serves both the house and the studio. The well system was inspected and tested and metered at that time also. So all of the water and septic are in compliance with everything required by law at this point. Number two, we use conservation practices as part of the programming, and all the artists are taught about conservation, and we use a reclamation program that recycles the water that's used in the art. Number three, because the number of artists in residence is so small, there's residents there less than 60 nights per year, and that I live alone there, the property uses less water than a two-person household. The property is well maintained with an upgraded driveway and dedicated parking. And as a side note, my property does not create excessive traffic. As I mentioned before, I'm single living there, and when the residents are there, there's less cars up and down the road as there would be in a two-person family. And number five, the art studio sits in the middle of the property in 5 acres. It's away from adjoining properties and homes, which means there's no noise or traffic. None of my adjoining neighbors can physically see the property, and I've been in contact with my immediate property owners on all 4 sides, and they're supportive, and several of them have submitted letters of support. And then finally, number 6, the number of days each year that the studios use for residency is about 60 days or 2 months. So mainly the artists stay in the studio, they're working, they kind of want to be left alone. They do venture into town for grocery shopping in the galleries. So I do want to point out the precedents which Dominic referred to. The Board of Commissioners approved a similar density variance to this. It was approved on February 13th, 2024, and it was the request of Francis Phillips, and his property is at 35 Mescalero Trail, which is about 1/3 of the mile up Apache Ridge Road, just up my way. In fact, it's the first place I stayed when I started coming to Santa Fe to paint. And he has 2 dwelling units of similar size on 6 acres. And like Francis Phillips, my property was listed and sold as a main house, a guest house, and the property was also inspected and assessed by the Santa Fe County as a main house and guest house. And at no time In past years, did anyone recognize this, bring it up, try to address the issue, or fix it prior to now? And I just want to read the real estate listing to you. This compound is comprised of an adobe main house, 2 professional studios. The larger of the 2 studios also functions as a guest house, as it includes a full kitchen and bath and is complete with refrigerated air. The property was also appraised and valued by the county as an art studio / guest house with 2 bedrooms. And I pulled a screenshot that's there, how it is listed right now on the assessor's webpage. And I was able to go back through site records. I could go back as far as 2011 that's on the webpage to show that that is how it's appeared on the assessor's report. So the impact and the undue hardship. I purchased the property out of foreclosure in 2019. It had sat empty for more than a year. It was neglected, and I've invested more than $125,000 in maintaining and renewing and upgrading this property. I've increased the property's value as well as its tax base. And as all county citizens, we are allowed to use our property to support ourselves in operating small businesses, including small art businesses. And this in turn does contribute to the livelihood and the economy of the overall county. Granting this variance is essential for the continued viability of my small art business. Without the variance, I'll be unable to fulfill the core functions of my business, significantly impacting my ability to operate. My art business is my only income. And the strict application of the code will result in exceptional financial hardship that's undue. It will result in the loss of my art business and income. So in close, I just want to summarize a few things. Number 1, I purchased the property, including the art studio guest house as is, well before the short-term rental code went into effect. I did not create the issue, and I am working with the county to remedy this. Number 2, the portion of the art studio used for dwelling is only 900 square feet, which falls within the guidelines of the living space being 50% smaller than the main home, not exceeding 1,400. And although there is no wall separating the areas, the renovation to build a wall will decrease the total space available to the studio and is cost prohibitive at $50,000. And I agree with all the conditions that Dominic outlined in the report. Building no additional structures, existing structures permitted, and actually those all are, and all of those permits were in the application package. The OSE and the NMED permits have already been provided, and those are all in the application package. Those are all current. And acquiring the Santa Fe County business license, which was applied for in May of last year, and that's been on hold by the county until this is settled. And then finally, number 4, denying the variance or requiring renovations are truly an undue hardship on a small business like myself. So I remain committed to being a positive presence in my immediate neighborhood and working with the county in any way possible.
Well, thank you very much. Any questions of the applicant?
I have some. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that presentation, Ms. Todd. So you mentioned that you had already gone to the New Mexico Environmental Department. Is that what I heard earlier?
Yes, as part of the sale of the real estate, the conditions are that your septic has to be inspected. And when they did that, they found the existing septic was falling in, caving in, so the seller was required to build a brand new septic. And so that was done in the fall of 2019, and they were permitted with the environmental agency.
So at that time, then, all these structures already existed, so they were already taken into consideration when the new septic system was
In fact,
put
they
in.
made it extra big, and I have to look what kind of gallons and what kind of holding tank it is, but
No, but that's fine,
Yeah.
because they'll look at the bathrooms and they'll size it
Yes.
appropriately, so I'm sure that was, if they permitted it, I'm sure it was done
Yeah.
correctly. So, that sounds really, really good. Well, I wanna
yeah, that was
commend
a bonus that I got a new septic.
you. Yeah, and you said you've been to the state engineer's office as well, where
Yes.
they had the well inspected in 2018.
Right, I did all the well permitting, went in and did all of that, and it was inspected and everything.
Okay. And I did see the pictures and the art, so the real question I have for you is, I think some of that was your art. Where can I purchase a piece from?
You can go to my website.
Okay, thank you.
No,
Thank
none
you.
of that was my art. That was a group of artists that were in April, and they were so prolific. They just blew me away.
Mr. Mendoza?
Yeah, I have a real quick question because I noticed that you say in here that you applied for the county business license and it's been over a year. Do you know why it's on hold?
What I was told at first that they put it on hold pending this outcome.
Oh,
That was what I was told, and I may be misunderstanding it, but I think that's a good question for the county.
I thought they might have given you some kind of
Yeah.
feedback. Okay, thank you.
But I've been operating under the temporary short-term rental permit.
Mr. Pava?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that detailed presentation. I wanted to ask, regarding road maintenance, this is an issue that's come up in many of the correspondence to the commission, the situation of the road, and that some people participate and some people don't participate. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, in fact, I didn't read it when I was doing my report, but in my handout, I addressed that. So 83 Apache Ridge Road has a voluntary group for voluntary road maintenance. And they post a sign at the bottom of the hill that says, please pay your road dues. There's no notice that goes out. You don't know who to send it to. I had to ask questions to find out who it was. So since I moved in, I've paid it every year. Until this last year, I missed it. So some of my neighbors came to the initial hearing, and I met with them afterwards, and I said, hey, let me help you. I'm really good at marketing. I'm really good at mailing things. Let's send out a mailing every year to make sure all the dues are paying. And one of my neighbors who's involved in the road maintenance fund said only 30% of the property owners pay into the road maintenance pool. So I thought, you know what, we can fix that. We can make it better.
Thanks for the clarification.
And if you've been up Apache Ridge, you know it needs maintenance.
That's good to know for the record. If the commission were to consider an approval of this variance, conditions of approval are typical, and as you saw, there are already 4 suggested by staff if that were the situation with the commission granting approval. Would you consider a condition that limits the nights per year, and if so, how many nights per year in the studio?
Well, yeah, I would consider it definitely, depending on what it is. Because as I get older, I reduce down the number, every year I've reduced down or tried to reduce down the number of artisan residencies because it takes work. So I'm not intending to expand in any capacity.
I noticed.
60 nights a year is not much.
So I caught that figure, 60. Is that a reasonable figure if there was a condition?
I would want it to maybe go up to 90 because sometimes, if I have somebody that wants to book a week and I'm already at 60 days and they can't do 61, I would want to have some flexibility, but it's something I definitely would discuss and explore.
So basically 90 nights a year is a quarter of the year.
Yeah.
Okay. And reading your report quickly that details your attempts with a contractor to kind of get some estimate of the cost of creating a separate entry residence from the studio. I get that. If this variance were to be granted, if there were a condition regarding limiting, say, 40% of the existing floor space with no new additions to that building, is that something that you are, to me, that seems to be the existing situation.
Tell me again what that.
Well, 900 divided by 2300 is like 38%, I think, so.
The total studio is 2,300. The current living space is 900 square feet.
Yeah. Okay.
I wouldn't expand that, no.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Pava. Carl?
So, Mr. Chairman, just one quick question on the recommended conditions. Number 2 says all existing structures shall be permitted with Santa Fe County. And so for staff, I mean, maybe I'm just reading it incorrectly, but as I understood it, all the buildings were permitted except possibly one. But if I read this, it makes it sound like none of them were permitted. And so is this language correct?
Mr. Chair, Commission Member Trujillo, it should actually state that the after-the-fact permit should come for the remodel of the actual addition or something as such.
Okay, because this puts, it seems like it could put more burden on this.
All the existing current permits were provided in the packet.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we get the language right so that there's no undue
Correct.
pressure on, or more work for you that's needed. So we could amend that in some way to say that? Okay. And then, Mr. Chairman and staff, I don't know the short-term code very well, but I don't think we have the authority as a board to limit the amount of nights in any case on any rental, do we? I would hate to hamstring somebody with that. I mean, if her business grows and
Yeah, thank you for the comment, Mr. Chair and Member Trujillo. I can't say with certainty that you don't have that authority, but on such short notice, I would be much more comfortable not imposing that type of limitation. That's an issue that really does relate more to the STR process itself. And the question before you, although you do have some flexibility to impose conditions, but the issue is really whether the variance is appropriate. And I'd prefer to avoid issues of jurisdiction and propriety by choosing what could be considered limitations not based on any real criteria.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mendoza?
Yeah, I just had I wanted to make a comment. The video really helped
Yeah,
for us to be able to see what your property looks like and what you're doing out there. And I just wanted to say, thank you to whoever put the video together, but,
me.
okay. But also that I think what you're doing captures the spirit of what Santa Fe is all about.
Thank you.
And I wanted to thank you for doing stuff like that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Eric?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. It's not addressed in any conditions. I read the Technical Advisory Committee report, and as they are wont to do, the fire indicated that there would need to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there need to be widening of the driveway and turnaround. And I'm not sure, because this would be granting of a variance. It's not additional work other than the after-the-fact permits. So maybe I'm just confused on my cases, but you've got a 10-foot wide driveway. A lot of trees would have to come out to make a 14-foot wide driveway. And you'd have to put a 60-foot hammerhead in somewhere, which is...
Is the hammerhead the turnaround?
either turnaround, either a pull-in back, three-point turn thing. And I'm trying to understand, was I mistaken in that, Renee indicating that, or I just don't see the touch point that the county would have in an after-the-fact permit to do a fire inspection to make sure that the work that is done meets fire. Am I off base here, or is that just a disconnect?
Chair, Commissioners, essentially when she applies for the after-the-fact permit, Fire will have to do an inspection. Fire also does an inspection when it comes to business licensing. And so that will be done, and it will be determined then, does she truly need it? The TAC letters are more of a generalized statement of, you could be looking at worst-case scenario this. And so as she applies for the ATF, it'll be inspected by Fire, and they will approve or deny or make recommendations on what needs to be done.
Great, thank you very much. And I just wanted to mention that is significant.
Yes.
The 14-foot wide, and actually for the trucks to turn around is a relatively big deal. So I just want to point that out. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions of the applicant? If not, this is a public hearing. Any members of
Thank
the
you.
public wishing to speak for or against this case, please step forward.
Chairman, there's nobody online either.
Nobody online? So I guess we close the public hearing. What are the wishes of the commission?
Mr. Chair,
Yes. Carl?
Go ahead.
I was, thank you,
Mr. Pava?
thank you, Mr. Trujillo, Mr. Chair. I was prepared to offer a motion in regard to the case, if I might, in the matter of case 24-5060 Beverly Todd density variance. Recommend approval of the variance, subject to findings of fact and several conditions, which I would elaborate if there is a second to the motion.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
So, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch the conditions, the 4 conditions that are listed.
Yes, there would be those 4 conditions, and there would be a condition concerning the primary use of the structure and limitations on its size, the lack of that no further addition to that structure would be considered, and limiting nights per year, if it's permitted as an STR, to 90 nights per year.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I think the only other one is in the conditions I brought up about item number 2, that it would just be an after-the-fact permit for the only structure that's not permitted, or something that staff deems acceptable rather than the way it's written. If staff believes this is written correctly and they're just going to be doing the after-the-fact for the one unstructured building, but it reads like everything is unpermitted to me.
Mr. Chair, it would be an after-the-fact for the remodel.
Okay, great. We can amend that language on number 2 to state that.
Mr. Chair, Commission Member Trio, that is correct.
Thank you.
Jeremy?
So it's my understanding that we cannot add another stipulation of, say, 90 days is the maximum she can operate the STR. Is that correct, Roger?
I did indicate that that was my preference. We've discussed the issue, and technically or legally, the purpose of this commission, the Planning Commission, is to enforce the SLDC, and the fact of the matter is that the short-term rental ordinance is not part of the SLDC. And it's really part of the business licensing ordinance. So I think there is a significant jurisdictional question there. And I would have concerns with trying to impose that type of restriction in this proceeding.
Mr.
Thank you.
Chair.
Yeah.
Eric?
Roger, and I'm wondering if it's possible if we amend the 90-night per year condition instead as a recommendation to the short-term rental and business license registration. We just recommend that there be a 90-night per year limitation. That way, I believe that's acceptable to the applicant, and I think that might meet Mr. Pava's concern without overstepping our authority.
You're stating that we recommended, that would be separate to the code, separate than this particular case.
And sorry for the dialogue, but so we're taking an action. If we were to approve this, that would be something that the folks who issue the short-term rental permits say, yes, they meet these conditions. If attached to that is a recommendation that's just that, kind of advisory, I don't know, I'm trying to thread the needle here, and so.
I'm wondering why we need that.
Okay, I'm fine with dropping it, never
Why
mind.
are we trying to limit?
So Chairman, Mr. Pava, you offered that as a condition? I didn't hear that. Is the 90 days?
It was when you asked about conditions. I proposed the one about the square footage and no additional square footage being added as separate condition addressing the nights per year permitted in the STR. However, I believe that that could be mentioned as Eric was suggesting. Perhaps it could be included in the findings rather than in the conditions, because the findings of fact could mention that, and that's what it is. It's in the record as a finding. I think I could construe to put it in what I've written up here as the three findings is why this variance could be approved. I don't know if council wants to comment on that.
Well, including it as a finding is not binding in any legal sense, so it's not exactly the same as a recommendation, but in essence, that's what you would be doing. I guess the question is really, or the question that I have, how do you craft a finding of fact regarding what you consider to be a maximum usage that's coming perilously close to really drawing some sort of conclusion, and I'm not sure that there's any basis in the record for that kind of finding of fact, but you wouldn't be prohibited from taking that step if the entire commission wanted to go that route.
Perhaps under contrary to public interest, it could be referenced. The variance tests.
I mean, I think any conclusions with respect to the public interest is more likely to be considered a conclusion of law rather than a finding of fact.
So, Mr. Chairman, I just want to know, I understand the motion, but I want to understand what's attached to the motion, and so, before we vote. And so, is it the current 4 recommendations with number 2 being changed to the loft, the unpermitted after the fact for the loft area, and just the 4? Is that what we're voting on, or is there others made by the person, by Dan recommending?
Mr. Chair, Carl, I think dropping the reference to nights per year would be fine. I think we could either embellish the 4 conditions, or we could add a 5th condition that specifically states that the primary use of the structure remain as a studio, artist studio, with no more than 40% of it used for STR purposes. No further addition to the building will be considered.
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Pava, I won't accept that condition. I think these 4 are here. I think trying to tell somebody exactly what they need to do with their building is, I won't accept that condition.
I don't understand why we're trying to put a condition like that on.
Because 40% of 900 square feet of 2,300 square feet is a round up to 40%, and 40% clearly keeps the existing situation without modifications. And then, at least in my view, it appears to be very subsidiary to the primary unit on the property. So really, this thing is just an ADU.
If I understand this, we have a motion for approval. Do we have a second? Yeah.
I'm still not clear about the conditions.
So at some point, if we don't get a second, the motion dies for a lack of a second.
Yeah.
Do we want anybody to?
There's no second on this at this point, but I will remind the commission that if there is a second, I could state the the findings to address the 3 variance criteria for the record.
Yes, Wendy?
Yeah, I don't think it's recoverable. Sorry, I can't figure out how to thread the needle if, you know, if we cannot do anything other than up or down and add conditions or not, if we cannot, you know, inform the STR review folks of our request. You know, we could ask the applicant to pinky swear that they would limit to 90 days, but I don't think that really has any legs either, so.
Mr. Chairman, if there is no second to the motion, I'd like to make a new motion.
Well, let me explain. If there's not a second to Mr. Pava's motion, the motion dies for the lack of a second. Now, Carl, you're welcome to
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
try your motion.
Okay. I'll make a motion that case 24-5060 is approved, the density variance, with the conditions that is listed 1 through 4, with changing number 2 that reads currently, all existing structures shall be permitted with Santa Fe County, to language that staff may help me out with, the unpermitted loft area must be permitted as an after-the-fact structure.
So again, it's not just the loft that was unpermitted, it's the conversion of the structure into a dwelling. So the addition of the kitchen and the bathroom as well. So I would state it would be the unpermitted interior remodel to convert the accessory structure into a dwelling.
Okay, as Mr. Cisneros.
And that was the accessory dwelling unit, correct? Okay, we have a motion.
I'll second it.
Who seconded that?
Me.
Mr. Pava, okay. We have a motion and a second. We have discussion. We have discussions on the motions.
No, I'm just saying, these are hard cases. These, when someone buys a piece of property for a specific use, and there's a history in the property that, you know, they bought as is, they're tough to, you know, this is her livelihood. They're really hard to work out, and we're gonna be seeing more and more of these because of the short-term rental. You know, it's just gonna be one after another.
Yeah, my comments are that, you know, these are cases where the buyer did not do their due diligence. The owner of this was in foreclosure. The bank owned the building, and they did not disclose to the buyer all the conditions. The buyer did not do their inspection with the county to find out if these were permitted or nothing. It's a big financial commitment you placed yourself in, and then all of a sudden, you know, this becomes a problem. And the only recourse you have is to come to the county to try to get this matter remedied. So we have a motion and a second for a...
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I just want to replay the greatest hits. I would urge the county to do whatever it can to bring in the Realtor community. You know, our first case today, Mr. Sneesby, who bought his property with the Realtor indicating he had agricultural water rights, and that was incorrect. So I really would urge whatever outreach can be done so that if you're thinking of moving to Santa Fe County and you want to buy a property, stop by to the friendly folks at 100 Catron Street and learn about the property and its allowable uses before making that down payment. So I'm just going to keep saying that you know, until we stop getting these kind of unfortunate situations. But that's all I want to say. Thank you.
I agree with you, Eric. We have a motion and a second. What are the... and now, those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Unanimous vote. Thank you.
Chair, before we move on, I need to move y'all back up to item 4, the consent agenda. Y'all took a vote without a motion or a second, and so I need y'all to re-vote on that.
We had item 4, we have to.
The consent agenda, yes, Chair. We need a motion to approve the consent agenda, it followed by a second and a vote.
Okay,
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
second, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Now we have petitions from the floor. I see none. Communications from the commission members. Any communications? I see none. Communications from the attorney.
I would like to say that I think Commissioner Abo's comment is appropriate. I'm not sure how that outreach might take place. It would be wonderful to see some sort of, whether voluntary or mandated, burden on real estate agents to from both the sellers and the buyers' side to ensure that a search is conducted to determine the permitting of all structures and compliance in general. We haven't had substantive in-house discussions on how that outreach might take place, but that is something that we're aware of.
It would probably take changing the law at the state legislature to do that, and so it'd be lobbying to. That's, I think, would be the hand to force if wanted.
Mr. Chair and Roger, actually, back when I worked at the county, they asked me to look at their website. And I think even if you put want to buy a property in Santa Fe County, click this button. And that might be scary to some folks, but I think it would serve, your work. It would streamline, and if you had a process to just say, if you're thinking of buying, if you created a handout to say, what's the property, here's what's allowed, what's not allowed, that kind of thing. I think just some simple notification so that the potential seller, potential buyer could do some research if they so chose. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, Commission members, we do reach out to the Association of Realtors. I have attended several meetings and informed them about our procedures. And we are currently working on a website to clarify a lot of the issues and how-to videos. So that will be coming forward.
Do we have matters from the land use staff?
Yes, Chair. I would like to introduce Ms. Alexandria Ladd. She is our new Director of Growth Management.
What was her name again?
Alexandria Ladd.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. I'm really excited to be here. This is the third week in this position, so I'm still drinking from the fire hose, but I'm really excited and appreciative of the great staff that I walked in to learn from, and looking forward to supporting them and kind of addressing some of our challenges as a team. I come to this position from the city of Santa Fe. I was an affordable housing planner there for 6 years after I graduated from the UNM's School of Planning. And then I became a consultant and wrote strategic housing plans for different communities around the state. Then I went back to the city in 2012 and left as its director of affordable housing. I will say this, I'm thrilled to be nearing the end of a planning commission meeting and the sun is still out. This is something I think almost never happened ever at the city's planning commissions. I'm looking at Commissioner Pava because we spent some time in those meetings together. But anyway, thanks so much. I'm just learning everything right now and look forward to getting to know all of you better, and thanks so much.
Thank you. Our next regularly scheduled meeting is September 19th, 2024. And can I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you. Meeting adjourned.